Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at the science of, well, making huge changes in your life through steps that feel almost laughably small. The whole idea of tiny changes, remarkable results.
That's exactly it. Our mission today is to pull apart the key ideas from James Clear's work on behavioral science. We're really going to distill the how and the why behind building routines that actually stick.
And this isn't just, a list of life hacks.
It's not at all. We're getting into the physics of habit formation.
Mm.
How these tiny, almost invisible shifts, these atomic shifts, can create this exponential change in your life.
And that word atomic, I love that. It's got this incredible double meaning, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a catchy title.
Yeah.
When we talk about atomic habits, we're really hitting two distinct ideas at the same time. The first one is the most obvious, the quantitative one.
The small one.
Exactly. Atomic as in an extremely small amount, the basic irreducible unit of a bigger system. That single tiny action you perform every day.
But the second meaning, that's the kicker for me.
Mm-hmm. Atomic as the source of, well, immense energy, immense power.
So we're talking about the building blocks that, when you stack them up, they release something explosive.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
The smallest part that, if you use it right, gives you the biggest possible payoff.
And to really show this compounding power in action, I think we have to start with what might be the most dramatic example in, well, modern sports history.
Oh, British cycling. It's the ultimate case study.
You really have to get the context here to appreciate it. Before 2003, British professional cycling was just, well, it was defined by failure.
And not just for a few years.
No, for almost a century. Think about this. Since 1908, they'd only won a single Olympic gold medal.
That's incredible.
They were such a non-entity that one of the biggest bike manufacturers in Europe actually refused to sell them bikes.
Can you imagine? They literally thought it would hurt their brand to have the British team riding their equipment.
That's how bad it was. But then, in 2003, this guy, Dave Brailsford, he arrives as the new performance director.
Yeah.
And he brought this really simple but kind of radical idea.
The aggregation of marginal gains.
That's it. And his whole strategy was not about finding some massive 50% jump in performance.
No, nothing like that. It was about searching for a tiny 1% improvement in absolutely everything that goes into riding a bike.
Everything.
And they applied this, ruthlessly, in places you would just never expect. Of course, they started with the obvious stuff.
Right. Redesigned bike seats for better comfort, biofeedback sensors.
Wind tunnel testing for more aerodynamic suits. Rubbing alcohol on the tires just for a little bit of extra grip.
But then they went into this territory of almost absurd detail.
Oh, yeah.
They had their riders wear electrically heated overshorts just to keep their muscle temperature perfect while they were waiting.
And the detail that I think just perfectly embodies this entire philosophy.
It has to be the truck.
It's the truck. They painted the inside of the team transport truck white.
And you have to ask, why? What does that have to do with cycling faster?
Because they figured out that the dark interior of the truck was hiding all this fine dust. And that dust was getting into the mechanics of these finely tuned, multi-$1,000 bikes.
Compromising the performance.
Exactly. Painting it white made the dust obvious, so they could keep the environment perfectly clean. It had nothing to do with speed directly. It was about maintenance and designing the environment.
You're not going to brag about painting the inside of a truck white. It's not glamorous.
No. But when you aggregate hundreds of these tiny 1% gains, the results were, well, they were historic.
Within 5 years, they just completely dominated the 2008 Beijing Olympics. They took 60% of the available gold medals in cycling.
And it didn't stop. By the 2012 London Games, they broke 7 world records and 9 Olympic records.
And a team that had never won the Tour de France, not once in 110 years.
They captured 5 victories in just 6 years with Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome.
It is the ultimate proof of concept. From total mediocrity to global dominance in less than a decade. All from 1% improvements just stacked on top of each other.
And the math here is so simple, but it's so critical for you to grasp. If you can get just 1% better every single day for 1 year,
you end up 37 times better than when you started.
That compounding power is really the central idea of our entire deep dive today.
So, okay, we see the power of that 1%. But the real question is, how do we apply this compounding power to our own lives? Because let's be honest, when you start a new habit, it almost never feels like you're compounding.
Right. it feels like you're going nowhere.
And that's really the first big hurdle, isn't it? Our own expectations. When we start something new, reading 10 pages a day, trying to learn an instrument, saving a little bit of money, we expect this linear progress.
We think effort should equal results right now. And that expectation is what just kills most efforts before they even get started. The reality of progress, as you can see in the source material, it's this long, flat line. It looks like your effort is doing absolutely nothing.
And then suddenly
Suddenly you hit an inflection point and the curve just shoots up, almost vertically. But that initial flat line, that is the killer.
people call that period the valley of disappointment. It's where you feel like you've just been running on a treadmill, you're putting in the work, but the scenery never, ever changes.
Yeah.
And you start to wonder if all that work was just wasted.
But it wasn't wasted. You were just on what's called the plateau of latent potential.
I like that phrase.
All that work was being stored. It was building up potential energy just, right below the surface of what you could actually see.
And that's where that ice cube metaphor really clicks for me.
Mhm.
So you've got this ice cube in a room, and the temperature's going up, right? 25 degrees, 26, all the way up to 31.
And nothing happens.
Nothing. It's still a solid block of ice. The work is happening, but you can't see it.
Right. It's all potential energy being stored. But then you hit that one extra degree.
31 to 32.
Oh,
And bam.
that's the breakthrough. The whole thing starts to melt. But it wasn't that 1 degree that did it. It was all the degrees that came before it.
And we just miss that. We give up on these small efforts because we don't see the immediate result.
But those 1% shifts are always happening. They're just, waiting to cross that critical threshold where change becomes visible.
And realizing that there is a threshold, that leads us right to the two big traps we all fall into when we try to change our lives.
Right. Number 1, we try to change the wrong thing. And number 2, we try to change things in the wrong way.
So we'll spend most of our time today talking about that wrong way with the 4 laws of behavior change.
But before we even get there, we have to talk about the dark side of this. The mirror image of compounding.
Negative compound.
Exactly. If 1% better every day makes you 37 times better, what do you think 1% worse every day does to your life?
Yeah, that really raises the stakes. We ignore these tiny bad decisions because, one donut isn't going to hurt you.
Right. It seems harmless. But those harmless choices, when they compound, they become incredibly destructive. Look at something like stress.
Mm-hmm.
A single traffic jam, you can handle that. The daily demands of parenting, you manage. But when you let those little daily stresses pile up day after day, year after year,
Compound.
they multiply into serious chronic health issues. High blood pressure, mental burnout, you name it.
The same thing happens with our internal monologue, right? Our thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. If you fall into these self-defeating thought loops,
Yeah.
telling yourself I'm worthless or I'm stupid or I'm not capable, you are actively conditioning your own mind
You're training yourself 1% at a time.
to see the world through a negative filter. And those thoughts compound until you're facing a full-blown crisis of self-belief.
We even see this play out on a societal level with something like outrage.
That's a great example. Major social movements or riots, they're almost never about a single isolated event.
No, it's the last straw.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are the result of this long, compounding series of microaggressions, daily frustrations, little injustices that just multiply and multiply until one final, seemingly small event just tips the scales.
So understanding that both growth and decay are exponential really makes you look at your daily choices differently.
You're always investing, every day. The only question is whether you're investing in your future self or in your future decay.
Okay, so let's tackle that first trap we mentioned, changing the wrong thing. Most of us, when we want to make a change, we focus entirely on the outcome. I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to write a novel.
But the sources are really clear in this. Focusing only on the goal is a deeply flawed strategy.
Why is that?
It sets you up for 2 major traps that just sabotage your motivation. First, it pushes you into something called the achievement trap. It's where your happiness is always deferred. It's always waiting for the next milestone. Once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy.
Right. And in the meantime?
In the meantime, you stop enjoying the process. Your satisfaction is completely tied to some future event that might not even happen.
So the goal becomes a source of stress, not motivation.
Exactly. And the second trap is that goals create this artificial black and white either-or conflict. Either you succeed or you fail.
And if you miss the goal by a tiny bit, the whole thing feels like a waste.
Right. It doesn't acknowledge all the progress you made. So instead, we have to look deeper. Behavior change actually happens on 3 different layers.
Okay, what are they?
You've got outcomes, which are the results you get. You've got processes, which are the systems you follow. And then at the core, you have identity.
And identity is what you believe about yourself.
It's what you believe. It's your self-image, your worldview, your core values. And this is the profound insight. True, lasting habit change is identity change.
So the point isn't just to get something, it's to become someone.
That's it exactly. The shift isn't, I want to run a marathon. It's, I want to become a runner. The process, the running itself, is just the proof of that new identity.
And this is where we run into that psychological defense mechanism you mentioned, identity sabotage.
Right. If you manage to achieve an outcome, let's say you do run that marathon, but your underlying self-image hasn't changed.
You still don't see yourself as a runner.
Correct. You'll probably stop training. You'll revert to your old ways. You achieve the goal, but you never internalize the identity.
You see this idea of belief systems everywhere, in politics, in our personal lives.
Absolutely. You can't just drop a democratic system of actions into a country with a dictatorial system of beliefs and expect it to work. The identity of the nation resists the change.
And we do the same thing to ourselves. We resist actions that contradict who we believe we are.
Think about those limiting statements we repeat about ourselves all the time. Oh, I'm terrible at directions. I'm just not a morning person. I'm horrible at math.
We say them like they're facts.
And when you accept them as facts, your brain feels this enormous internal pressure to act in a way that's consistent with that identity. You will unconsciously sabotage opportunities to improve your math skills because you're protecting the integrity of your identity as someone who's bad at math.
So if the identity is fighting back, how do you flip the script? How do you make a new habit actually stick?
It all comes down to creating a powerful feedback loop, a loop of pride and proof.
Okay.
The ultimate form of motivation, the one that really sticks.
The intrinsic kind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's when a habit stops being something you do
Yeah.
and starts becoming part of who you are. It becomes part of your identity and you start to take pride in it.
There's that anecdote about the writer, Brian Clark, that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes. He'd been trying to stop biting his nails for years just using willpower, which is incredibly hard. But the change didn't become permanent until he started to see himself differently.
He went and got his first professional manicure, which for him was sort of a financial commitment device.
Right. But the real moment of change, the breakthrough, came when the manicurist looked at his hands and said he had, quote, really healthy, attractive nails.
And suddenly, everything shifted for him.
Completely. He wasn't just a guy trying to stop a bad habit anymore. He was now someone who had healthy, attractive nails. And he took deep pride in keeping them that way.
He had proof of a new identity.
And the habits that went along with it, caring for his hands, they became effortless because now they were aligned with his new self-image.
That is such a critical realization. The more pride you take in any part of your identity, whether it's the size of your biceps or how organized your desk is or the quality of your writing, the more motivated you are to maintain the habits that support it.
The action reinforces the belief, and the belief reinforces the action. It's a permanent, positive loop.
It's the difference between saying, I'm trying to do this, and saying, I am this type of person.
That shift from focusing on the outcome to focusing on the identity, that's the right thing to change. So now we can move on to the wrong way, which to change things. And that's where the 4 laws of behavior change come in.
Okay, so to understand the laws, we need to quickly revisit the basic neurological framework. Habits work in a 4-step cycle, right?
That's right. It's cue, craving, response, and reward.
The cue is the trigger, the time, a place, the person you're with.
Or the action you just finished. Then comes the craving, which is the motivational force. And this is key.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't craving the habit itself. You're craving the emotional shift you think the reward will bring.
Right. And the response is the actual habit you perform.
And finally, the reward. That satisfies the craving. And more importantly, it teaches your brain whether that whole loop was worth remembering for the future.
It's that classic idea from psychology, Thorndike's law of effect.
Exactly. Actions that have satisfying consequences get repeated. Actions with unpleasant consequences get avoided. That's how the loop gets stronger or weaker.
Now, before we dive into the first law, I think we should address a really common misconception about habits.
That they limit your freedom.
Yeah, that routine is restrictive or boring or that it kills spontaneity.
I actually think it's the complete opposite. Good habits create freedom.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you don't have good financial habits, you are constantly stressed about money. That stress limits your freedom of choice every single day.
Or if you don't have basic health routines automated, you spend precious mental energy every morning debating whether or not you should work out.
Exactly. When you automate the fundamentals, your health, your finances, your core work processes, you free up an enormous amount of mental space. Good habits handle the baseline, so your creativity and higher level thinking can run free.
You don't have to sweat the small stuff, so you have more energy for the big stuff.
That's the idea. Okay, so law one is make it obvious. The challenge here is that most of our habits, especially the bad ones, run on autopilot. They start without any conscious thought at all.
And this is what makes them so sticky and so dangerous.
This reliance on non-conscious cues is the source of so many mistakes. The source material has these great anecdotes about professionals just running on autopilot, like the retail clerk who was supposed to be cutting up used gift cards.
And instead, on muscle memory, she swiped and cut a customer's actual credit card in half.
Or the former preschool teacher who, in her new office job, kept asking her adult coworkers if they'd washed their hands after using the restroom.
Or my favorite, the former lifeguard who's off duty in a park and finds himself yelling "walk" at random kids who are running.
These aren't intentional mistakes, they're just moments where the environment triggered a deeply ingrained routine and the conscious mind wasn't there to stop it.
And that's the paradox, isn't it? The more we repeat these patterns, the less likely we are to even notice them, let alone question them.
We lose our self-awareness about the cues all around us. So the first strategy for making things obvious is to bring those non-conscious cues back into your conscious mind.
And the gold standard for this is that Japanese safety system, pointing and calling.
It's brilliant. Train operators in Japan use it to reduce errors by up to 85%. Accidents drop by 30%.
And all they do is, they don't just look at a signal.
No, they physically point at it and they verbally call out, "Signal is green." They're engaging their eyes, their hands, their mouth, and their ears.
It forces this deliberate moment of awareness. It pulls the action out of the subconscious.
And you can apply this to your own life. Before you leave the house, don't just mentally check. Verbally say, okay, I have my keys, I have my wallet, I have my phone. It stops you from just assuming you've remembered everything.
Okay, that's strategy one. What's the second?
The second is called habit stacking. And this is all about leveraging the cues you already have. Instead of relying on a vague time or place, you piggyback your new habit onto an old established one.
And the formula for that is just so simple.
Right, it's after my current habit.
I will do my new habit.
So it's not I'll meditate sometime today. It's
After I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. It's concrete, it's anchored.
Or after I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. The existing habit pouring coffee, taking off your shoes, is a solid, reliable cue that you can use to launch the new, more fragile habit.
And the third strategy is environment design. This one is huge.
It's massive. You have to recognize that almost half of your brain's resources are dedicated to visual processing. So the most powerful thing you can do is make the cues for your good habits physically, visually obvious.
It's a way to change your behavior without having to rely on willpower at all.
The hospital cafeteria study is the perfect example. They didn't lecture anyone about eating healthy. They just made one simple change. They put bottled water in every single drink station and right at eye level in the refrigerators by the registers.
They made the healthy choice the most obvious choice.
And the results were immediate. Soda sales dropped by over 11%, and water sales shot up by over 25%. No one's willpower changed. Only the environment changed.
The environment really is the invisible hand that shapes our behavior.
Absolutely. Like that study on home energy use. They found that houses where the electrical meter was visible in the main hallway used significantly less energy.
Because the cue for your usage was obvious, you couldn't ignore it.
And then there's the famous example from Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. They put a tiny sticker of a fly in the center of the men's urinals.
And that tiny, unexpected visual cue.
It gave men something to aim for, and it reduced spillage and cleaning costs by 8%. A tiny change to the visual environment created a big change in behavior.
So the mantra here becomes something like one space, one use.
That's a great way to put it. You want to recontextualize your environment to make good habits easier. If you have trouble sleeping, the advice is to only get in your bed when you're tired. You want your brain to associate the context of bed only with sleep, not with scrolling your phone or watching TV.
And if you're struggling to be creative in your home office, maybe you need to go work at a library or a coffee shop for a while.
Exactly. A new context gives you a fresh slate, free from your old, unhelpful cues. You have to be the architect of your environment, not just a passive victim of it.
Okay, so if we want to break bad habits, we just invert this law. Law one becomes make it invisible.
And this might be the single most important strategy for self-control. The source material is very clear. Relying on willpower to resist temptation over the long run is a losing battle.
Willpower is a finite resource.
It is. When you're tired or hungry or stressed, your willpower is the first thing to go. So the real secret to self-control isn't about being strong, it's about being smart. It's about optimizing your environment before temptation ever shows up.
So if you're playing too many video games,
Unplug the console and put it in a closet after you're done. Just add that little bit of friction, remove the visual cue.
if you're mindlessly checking social media all day,
Delete the apps from your phone. Force yourself to only check them on your desktop computer. That tiny bit of effort, having to walk over to the computer and log in, is often enough to break the non-conscious habit loop.
so it's about spending your energy on optimizing the environment, not on resisting temptation in the moment.
Precisely. Make the cues for your good habits impossible to miss, and make the cues for your bad habits completely invisible. Put the healthy food at the front of the fridge and hide the junk food. It's simple, but it's incredibly effective because it bypasses the need for willpower entirely.
So if law one is about the cue, law two is about the craving. And the law is make it attractive.
Right. And to make a habit attractive, you have to understand the engine of all desire, which is the neurotransmitter dopamine.
We think of dopamine as the pleasure chemical.
And it is, but this is where the neuroscience gets really counterintuitive. Dopamine isn't released when you experience pleasure. It's released primarily in anticipation of pleasure.
So wait, the feeling of wanting something is neurologically more powerful than the feeling of actually getting it.
In many ways, yes. Our brains are fundamentally wired for wanting, not for liking. We have far more neural circuitry dedicated to seeking rewards than we do to actually enjoying them.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
Look at the brain's core desire circuit, the nucleus accumbens. 100% of it lights up during the wanting phase, but only about 10% is active during the liking or the enjoyment phase.
So desire is the engine. Enjoyment is just the brief exhaust.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this explains why some behaviors become so compulsive. Anything associated with a massive dopamine, spike drugs, gambling, junk food, social media notifications is intensely habit-forming because the craving becomes overwhelming.
And this craving mechanism brings us to this idea of supernormal stimuli.
Yes, this comes from the work of Nobel laureate Nico Tinbergen. He found that you could create exaggerated artificial cues that would trigger a much stronger response in animals than the real thing.
Like the herring gull chicks. They naturally peck at a small red spot on their mother's beak to get food.
Right. But when Tinbergen created a fake cardboard beak with 3 large, unnatural red dots on it, a supernormal stimulus, the chicks went crazy for it. They pecked at it furiously, preferring the exaggerated fake to the real thing.
Or the goose that will instinctively roll an egg back into its nest.
But it will make an incredible, exhausting effort to roll a volleyball-sized object into the nest if you give it one. The brain sees the exaggerated cue, and its rational response just gets completely overridden.
And this is exactly what modern society does to us.
All day, every day. Our ancient brains evolved to seek out rare things like salt, sugar, and fat. Modern junk food is engineered by food scientists to be a supernormal stimulus. It's got highly concentrated ingredients, often paired with what they call dynamic contrast.
Like the crunch of a chip followed by the creaminess of a dip.
Exactly. It keeps the experience novel, and it encourages you to eat way past the point of being full.
Social media is the same thing. It's concentrated, immediate social approval in the form of likes and comments delivered through a little glowing box.
And advertisements use perfect lighting, makeup, Photoshop. These are all exaggerated cues designed to overwhelm our brain's ancient reward-seeking pathways and drive compulsive behavior.
So, given all that, how do we flip this powerful wiring to make our good habits more attractive?
The first strategy is called temptation bundling. You link an action you want to do with an action you need to do.
So you're using the thing you're already craving as the reward for the thing you're avoiding.
That's it. It's based on something called Premack's principle. More probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors.
The famous example is the engineering student, Ronan Byrne, who wanted to watch Netflix but knew he needed to exercise.
So he hacked his stationary bike. He rigged it so that Netflix would only stream if he was cycling at a certain speed. He was basically telling himself, I get to do the thing I want, watch Netflix, but only while I'm doing the thing I need to do.
He bundled the temptation with the habit.
And businesses do this constantly. Think about how ABC branded its Thursday night TV lineup as TGIT. Thank God, it's Thursday. They bundled the habit of watching their shows with the existing desire for relaxation, drinking red wine, and eating popcorn. They made the habit attractive by packaging it with things you already wanted to do.
Okay, so that's strategy one. What's strategy two?
Leveraging the power of social norms. We are at our core herd animals. We have this deep, primal desire to belong. For most of human history, being cast out from your tribe meant certain death.
So gaining approval, fitting in, that's a huge motivational driver.
It's massive. And what that means is that whatever habits are normal in your culture or in your peer group automatically become more attractive. We can't help but imitate the behaviors of the majority around us.
This desire to fit in can even override our own logic. The source material mentions that study with chimpanzees.
Right. A chimp learned a much better way to crack nuts in one group. But when it was moved to a new group that used a less effective method, it abandoned the superior technique.
Just to blend in.
Just to blend in. The reward of belonging was more powerful than the reward of being more efficient.
And humans are no different. We'd often rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves.
So the optimal strategy for habit change is to join a culture where, 1, your desired behavior is the normal behavior, and 2, you already have something in common with the other members.
That's why niche communities are so powerful, like the nerd fitness group.
A perfect example. They help people who are already passionate about video games and sci-fi to get fit. They're building this new identity around shared interests, which makes the hard habit of exercise feel more attractive because it's just what our tribe does.
And the final strategy is more internal. It's about reprogramming your own mindset.
Right. We can make hard habits much more attractive just by reframing how we talk about them.
Yeah.
We are constantly using this language of burden. I have to go to work. I have to clean the kitchen.
But just shifting one word from have to get to is transformative.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah.
You get to go to work today, which means you have an opportunity that many people don't. You get to go for a run this morning, which means your body is healthy and capable.
It connects the small, immediate action to the bigger, more desirable identity.
Exactly. Saving money stops being a sacrifice and becomes freedom, because every dollar you save increases your future options. Reframing exercise as an opportunity to build endurance completely changes your desire to put on your shoes.
You can even reframe feelings of anxiety. Instead of telling yourself, I'm so stressed about this presentation, you can say, I'm excited and this adrenaline is going to help me focus.
The physical symptoms are the same, the fast heartbeat, the quick breathing. But the internal story you tell yourself turns that anxiety into an attractive tool for concentration.
You can even build little motivation rituals around this.
Right. You practice associating a positive cue with a focused state. The writer, Ed Lattimore, noticed his focus immediately improved just by putting on his headphones. He had conditioned himself over time. Headphones on means it's time for focus work.
So the whole point of Law 2 is that desire, which is driven by anticipation, always comes before action.
And if you can manipulate your environment and your own mindset to make the habit more attractive, you create the craving you need to actually push you into the next phase, the response.
Okay, so that brings us to the response phase and the third law of behavior change, which is make it easy.
And this law is governed by one of the most fundamental principles of human nature, the law of least effort.
Meaning, if you give us two options, we will almost always gravitate toward the one that requires the least amount of work.
Always. We are wired to conserve energy. Even on a macro historical scale, this principle holds true. You can look at the spread of agriculture thousands of years ago. The path of least effort literally dictated which civilizations rose and fell.
Right, that's the geographical friction argument. Farming spread much faster east to west across Europe and Asia than it did north to south in the Americas.
Because locations along the same latitude share very similar climates. So farmers in Eurasia could domesticate a few key crops, like wheat and barley, and then grow them across a vast continent. It was low friction.
Whereas in the Americas, traveling north to south meant you were hitting radically different climates every few hundred miles.
Which meant you had to constantly domesticate entirely new crops. It was incredibly high friction. And that small difference in effort, compounded over centuries, led to huge differences in population and technology. Humans always follow the path of least resistance.
And this tendency to follow the easy path is what leads us into that trap of confusing motion with action.
It's such a common trap. Motion is all the preparation stuff. It's planning, brainstorming, reading another self-help book. Action is actually doing the habit. Writing the sentence, making the sales call, doing the push-up.
Motion feels really productive.
It feels great because it lets you feel like you're making progress without ever running the risk of failure or judgment. We spend weeks creating the perfect workout plan, that's motion. Instead of just putting on our shoes and going for a walk, that's action.
So preparation becomes a form of procrastination.
A very sophisticated form of procrastination.
Yeah.
We have to remember that repetition is the only thing that really creates change. It's repetition that literally restructures your brain.
Like the London taxi driver study.
The perfect example. Their hippocampi, the part of the brain responsible for spatial memory, physically grew larger as they spent years repeatedly navigating the thousands of complex streets in London. The brain adapts to what you repeat. Repetition is the commitment.
Okay, so how do we make things easy enough to repeat? Strategy 1 is to prime the environment.
Right. You have to design your world so that doing the right thing requires almost zero extra effort.
You mentioned the Japanese manufacturing concept of lean production. They were obsessed with removing waste.
Obsessed. Down to redesigning workspaces so that workers wouldn't waste a fraction of a second twisting their body to reach for a tool. And this ruthless focus on removing friction translated directly into higher quality and efficiency.
Which is why, in the 1970s, Japanese TVs were 5 times less likely to need repairs than American ones.
Every successful modern service is just a friction removal device. Meal delivery, ride-sharing, voice-activated speakers. They all work by eliminating the tiny steps between your desire and the outcome. We have to apply that same ruthless efficiency to our own homes and workspaces.
And this brings us to the resetting the room strategy.
Yes, from Oswald Knuckles, the IT developer. He had this realization that he shouldn't just clean up after his last action. He should be preparing the space for his next intended action.
So when he's done watching TV, he doesn't just toss the remote on the couch.
No, he puts the remote back where it goes, he folds the blanket, and he resets the room exactly how he wants to find it the next time he sits down. When he's waiting for the shower to warm up, he wipes down the toilet.
He's being proactively lazy, making the future good choice incredibly easy.
Exactly. By laying out your workout clothes the night before, or having your healthy lunch pre-chopped in the fridge, you remove those tiny points of friction that make the good choice feel like the hard choice.
And if we invert Law 3 for bad habits, it's about increasing friction.
This is where we get into commitment devices, or what some people call a Ulysses Pact. You're basically automating a future good decision by making the bad decision really inconvenient or even impossible.
The classic example is Victor Hugo procrastinating on writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
He literally locked himself in his study. He had his assistant take away all of his clothes, leaving him with just this big shawl. With no proper clothes to wear outside, he had no choice but to stay in and write. He created immense friction for the distraction of going out.
You can do this in smaller ways, unplugging the TV and taking the batteries out of the remote after each use. That adds just 10 seconds of friction to turning it back on.
Or leaving your phone in another room until lunchtime. That small physical barrier of having to get up and walk to another room is often enough to break the unconscious urge to check it every 2 minutes.
And the final and maybe most powerful way to make a habit easy is the 2-minute rule.
This one is a game changer. The idea is to scale down any new habit you want to start until it takes 2 minutes or less to do.
Why 2 minutes?
Because the goal is to keep the starting ritual below the point where it feels like work. The famous writer Ernest Hemingway used to stop writing for the day right when he was in the middle of a good sentence. He wanted to make it as easy as possible to start again the next day. The beginning has to be effortless.
So read before bed each night becomes read 1 page.
And do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat.
I need to exercise becomes I need to change into my workout clothes.
You're just focusing on mastering the very first 2 minutes of the behavior. You build the ritual first, and then you can optimize it later. The momentum will often carry you much further.
And these 2-minute choices tend to happen at what the sources call decisive moments.
Right. These are the handful of moments throughout your day that have an outsized impact. It's that little fork in the road. The moment you decide whether to order takeout or start cooking the healthy meal you planned, the choice between picking up your book or picking up the video game controller.
And the whole point of Law 3 is to make sure that when you get to that fork in the road, the path to the good choice is the one with the least possible resistance.
because the difference between a good day and a bad day often comes down to just a few productive choices made at those decisive moments.
All right, that brings us to the final stage of the loop, the reward, and the fourth law. Make it satisfying.
And this is really the cardinal rule of all behavior change. It's simple. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
And this is so deeply wired into us from an evolutionary standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. Our Paleolithic ancestors lived in what's called an immediate return environment. If you found a berry bush, the reward was immediate. You ate the berries. If you failed on a hunt, the consequence was immediate. You went hungry.
But our modern world is the complete opposite. It's a delayed return environment.
Right. Saving for retirement, building a career, getting in shape. All of these things require you to ignore an immediate reward like buying something nice or eating junk food for a payoff that might be weeks, months, or even decades in the future.
So our ancient brain wiring is in direct conflict with what it takes to succeed in modern society.
And that's the fundamental problem of habit change. Good habits have immediate costs. Exercise feels like work now. Saving money feels like deprivation now. The rewards are far off.
And bad habits have immediate rewards. Smoking is pleasurable now. Scrolling social media is satisfying now. The costs, disease, debt, wasted time are all delayed.
Success in almost every field requires you to master the skill of delaying gratification. We know that people who are good at this have better health outcomes, higher test scores, and better responses to stress. But since we can't fundamentally rewire our brains, we have to find ways to hack the system.
And that means finding a way to add some immediate pleasure to our long-term good habits.
That's strategy one. Add immediate pleasure. You have to find a way to give your brain an instant sensory signal that reinforces the good behavior, tricking it into liking the cost.
The public health example from Karachi, Pakistan, is just brilliant.
It's perfect. Hand washing rates were dangerously low, even though everyone knew it was important for their health. And the reason was that the soap they had was just unpleasant to use.
So this team, led by Stephen Luby, they partnered with Procter & Gamble.
And they introduced Safeguard soap. It was a soap that foamed up really nicely and had a great smell.
It was immediately satisfying to use.
Exactly. And that instant positive sensory feedback dramatically increased how consistently people wash their hands. They didn't do it because of the delayed reward of better health. They did it because the process itself was immediately satisfying.
We can do the same thing with something like saving money.
Absolutely. If you hate the feeling of deprivation that comes with saving, create your own little self-loyalty program. If you decide to skip your daily $5 coffee, immediately transfer that $5 into a dedicated savings account and label that account something exciting like Trip to Europe Fund.
So you get the immediate satisfaction of seeing that fund grow.
Right. It provides an instant reinforcement for making the sacrifice.
Okay, strategy 2 is habit tracking, or making progress visual.
And tracking is powerful because it actually leverages multiple laws at once. It makes a habit obvious, it can be attractive to see the streak grow, and checking the box is immediately satisfying.
Like the story of Trent Dursmid, the stockbroker who used the paperclip strategy.
It's so simple and so effective. He started every day with 2 jars on his desk. One was full of 120 paper clips, and the other was empty. After every single sales call he made, he would move 1 paper clip from the full jar to the empty jar.
And he didn't focus on commissions or long-term goals?
No, he focused only on the immediate, satisfying, visual feedback of moving all 120 of those paper clips every single day. Within 18 months, he was one of the top brokers at his firm.
This is the same idea behind the "don't break the chain" mantra that Jerry Seinfeld supposedly used for writing jokes.
Exactly. The focus isn't on writing a great joke every day. The focus is on the immediate satisfaction of just showing up and putting another X on the calendar. You're reinforcing the identity of someone who shows up, and you're protecting the chain.
There is a warning here, though. You have to be careful what you measure.
A critical warning. If a restaurant only measures its daily revenue, it might push its servers to rush customers out the door, which boosts short-term sales but kills the long-term customer experience.
So you need to track the process, not just the outcome.
Right. It might be better to track something like the percentage of customers who leave a generous tip, or the number of new words you write each day. You need to measure the things that align with the identity you're trying to build.
And the final strategy is the inversion of Law 4, using accountability and punishment to make bad habits immediately unsatisfying.
Right. We see this all the time with social contracts, like mandatory seatbelt laws. When there is a group punishment for not doing something, compliance skyrockets.
And we can create this for ourselves with a personal habit contract.
This is where you get really serious. It's a formal, written agreement, usually with an accountability partner like a friend or a trainer. And it outlines your specific habits, your targets, and most importantly, an immediate and painful consequence for failure.
The story of Brian Harris is a perfect example of this. He was a huge fan of the Auburn football team.
A diehard fan.
Yeah.
And his habit contract stated that if he missed his diet goals or skipped his sprints, he had two punishments. First, he had to pay his trainer $100.
Okay, that's painful.
But the second one was worse. He also had to wear the apparel of their biggest rival, an Alabama hat, for the rest of the day.
Oh, that's brutal. For a true fan, that is way worse than the money.
And that's the point. It's immediate emotional pain. It works because it takes the consequence of the bad habit out of the abstract future, gaining weight someday, and puts it squarely in the immediate emotional present. You're forcing your brain to avoid that instant pain by making the better long-term choice.
So we've walked through the 4 pillars of building habits. We started with that tiny idea of marginal gains, and we moved through the 4 laws that make those gains sustainable. Make it obvious, the cue; attractive, the craving; easy, the response; and finally, satisfying, the reward.
And the core insight through all of this remains the same. These tiny changes compound in incredibly powerful ways, but only if we align our systems with the identity we want to build.
Which brings us to the final challenge for long-term success. What happens when the motivation fades? What happens when it all just gets boring?
And that is the greatest threat to long-term success. It's not failure, it's boredom. And we overcome this by using what's called the Goldilocks rule.
Goldilocks.
It says that peak human motivation happens when you're working on tasks of just manageable difficulty.
Not too hard, not too easy.
Exactly. Right on the edge of your current abilities. If a task is too hard, you get anxious and you quit. If it's too easy, you get bored and you quit. You need to find that sweet spot that balances effort and success, that sweet spot between boredom and anxiety.
Like Steve Martin's long 18-year climb to becoming a comedy superstar.
A perfect example. He was constantly tweaking and expanding his stand-up routine, but only by a minute or two each year. He would mix his guaranteed, proven jokes with just enough new, experimental material.
So he was getting just enough wins to stay motivated.
And just enough mistakes and failures to keep him pushing and working harder.
And that ability to just show up and do the work, even when it's not exciting, that's really what separates professionals from amateurs.
That's everything. Anyone can work hard when they feel inspired. Professionals stick to the schedule. They show up and they master the fundamentals, even when the work feels tedious. That is how you survive the plateau of latent potential and reach the other side.
And finally, for long-term growth, we have to build in moments of reflection and refinement.
You can't just set it and forget it. The best performers are constantly reviewing their process. The Kenyan runner, Eliud Kipchoge, maybe the greatest marathoner of all time, takes detailed notes after every single practice to analyze what worked and what didn't.
Chris Rock, before he tapes a big comedy special, will test hundreds of jokes in tiny little clubs, recording the audience's reaction to every single line so he can refine it.
And the highest level of this is what you might call an integrity report. It's where you periodically revisit your core values and you review your current habits to make sure they're still aligned with the person you truly want to become.
It's an annual check-in to ask, are my daily atomic actions still pointed in the right direction?
These moments of reflection are what prevent that slow, invisible slide that happens when we stop paying attention to the 1%. They ensure our systems are always serving the identity we're proud of.
This whole deep dive has been about learning how to work with our natural wiring, not against it. Understanding that desire comes before action, and that we can architect our environment to make our future selves successful.
And that brings us to our final, provocative thought for you to take away from all this. We live in a culture that prizes being smart, that prizes intelligence above almost everything else. But the truth is, being curious is fundamentally better than being smart.
Why is that?
Because curiosity is an active process. It leads to exploration and action. Intelligence, by itself, doesn't compel you to do anything. We know our actions are rooted not in what is logical, but in what we find attractive and desirable. The feeling that System 1, emotional craving, always comes first. Rationality only shows up later to justify it. So if you truly want to change your life, don't just start by trying to be smarter. Start by figuring out what genuinely sparks your curiosity. Cultivate that deep internal desire, because if you can find a why that's big enough, you can always overcome anyhow.